Hey everyone. Oh, look, I'm looking all messed up. Angie, I couldn't talk. Ellen, good morning. Fran, hey Annie. All right, I've got the toque on, not because namaste, not because it's cold, Mark, but because of the wind. All right, I don't need to introduce myself because you're all my friends and I love you. These, ladies and gentlemen, are the Dardanelles Straits. Look at the wind. The wind is wild, and I have a whole story to tell about it. That's what actually keyed me into trying a very last minute tour. But there is sunset. And then, there is sunset over the mouth of the Dardanelles. You're looking out at Gallipoli Peninsula. The ambience is fantastic, Rena. That opens out into the Aegean Sea. This is in the Western Occidental world, or Europeans might call it the Old World, the most important straits in certainly Greek and Roman history. At least I can't. Now, I couldn't drag the kid out. Actually, I could drag him out, but I put on, hey, Chloe, I put on the toque, again, not because it's cold, but because to cover up the earbuds, because the wind is wild. You would, all the Dutch would come here and say, uncontrolled water. So let me just frame where I am here for a second. I couldn't get any closer to the end because it's a naval port. But when I look across, Keitapahir Fort, 1463. Hey, Karen, nice to see you. Well, Andrea, yes, because it's winter and it is the Dardanelles and then the Bosphorus Straits. But I have three different subjects to cover today, which is why I wanted to do a tour with everyone here. By the way, I first came here, I realize that I'm obviously remarkably young, but I first came here with a backpack on my back 29 years ago. I was 2, and which was pretty bold of me. But this is, and if you have a map, you laugh, they'll laugh too quickly. If you have a map, scan out a little bit, because where I am standing, so I am in the city of Çanakkale, right? When you see the C with the squiggle or an S with a squiggle in Turkish, it's the sh or the ch sound. Otherwise, the C is a J sound. Anyway, all that noted, this is the narrowest point of the Dardanelles Straits into the Marmara Sea, which of course is the Sea of Marble, and then onto the Bosphorus Straits, where I was yesterday in Istanbul. In fact, the Romans think their story comes from Troy, but I'll get into that. So this is the narrowest point. This is controlling the water coming in through, of course, the meeting of Europe and Asia. So you don't get more significance in this part of the world than you do here. I keep wanting to walk out a bit, but if the wind gets just too frenetic, let me know. By the way, I love fishing as well, and these people are all fishing. They're getting a mackerel, but another little fish. It's quite small whitefish. So they put 6 hooks on, and they pulled them in. But there is a monument over there because I have, I say, 3 big subjects I'd like to talk about. In fact, give me a second just to introduce where I am. So the city of Çanakkale, if I curve around for a second, is about 150,000 people. It's very important historically. And we're going to walk up along the waterfront here. I did ask the guide, because I had a guide today, we went down to Troy, and he said the lights come on, but it's still light till about 6, so I'm hoping it works out for light-wise. Several hundred kilometers from Istanbul, way up that way, of course, at the corner of the Bosphorus Straits and the Golden Horn, down past the Marmara Sea, out through this peninsula that comes down here, and then to that community, and then took a ferry across. However, the Turkish government is busy building the longest span suspension bridge in the world, which is nearly finished. It's dramatic. It's got a little bit of that kind of government dictatorial feel to it a little bit because the colors of like Turkish flag. Setting that aside, it'll be incredible. But this, in terms of the winds, about 2 days out of 2 weeks to a month, the winds are coming from where they are today. So it was all hazy coming down because it's actually blowing dust all the way up from Africa, from the Sahara Desert, from Egypt. I'm just back up so it doesn't grab my phone. So this is just like skiing. So it blows it up. So in ancient times, boats would come in to trade, they would have to pull over here. Um, it is Diana. Yep, it's the Marmaris, or it's not known under several different names, but it's the origin of the word marble, and they mined marble on the islands in the middle of the sea. The key giveaway of any historical site, if you see marble on it, you pretty much know it was Roman in this part of the world. If it doesn't have marble, it could be pre-Roman. But they would come in, and then if the winds died down, because the bulk of the winds come from the north down here, cooling it off. So if the winds come from the north, which is the dominant winds, then the ships would have to sit here in sailing days, which of course is 98% of sailing history. And then when the wind would shift, they would come in. If they sat here, they had to pay taxes to Troy. So, and it moved, of course, over time. So 20 kilometers south of me is the historic site of Troy, uncovered in the 1870s by German Schliemann. Now, he himself is a story unto himself as well, because he was the son of a priest, didn't have any money, but his dream in his life was to actually find the city of Troy. And he did find it, but first, to finance his need for money, he first went and sold arms to the Russians during the Crimean War, and then he went off to the gold rush in California. He got rich enough, and he found himself a wife on Tinder or something similar, 19th century Tinder, and he said the thing he was looking for in a female companion was the ability to read Old Greek. And then he came here, looked around for Troy, didn't find it, came to Çanakkale, but there was only one ferry every 2 weeks at that time. In order to make his way up to Istanbul, he met an English merchant who helped deal with the licensing for boats to come through during the trading period. And that merchant actually had ruined pottery and so forth that he said he found from what looks like an archaeological site. They went down and dug up Troy. Now, the archaeological site of Troy is quite small. There were 9 and maybe 10 different cities starting at 3000 BC. Just to put that 5,000 years ago. Troy, as we know it today, Troy in terms of the Trojan horse and so forth. I always thought Trojans came in little packets. But the Trojan horse, that whole story, of course, was written down in the 8th century BC by Homer in his Odyssey, right? In the Odyssey. So it was already 500 years old, but it was Troy 6 that they believed. Now, they know a war happened, and they know a war happened for all sorts of archaeological reasons, but it really was just word of mouth that brought it down there. So there's no telling, but the wind is grabbing me so much. Incidentally, everyone, the Turks are as friendly as they appear. What Sally told me yesterday is that people are all very interested in YouTube. So if anyone walks up while I'm filming, I'm just going to say YouTube, partly because I can't explain well enough in Turkish that I'm doing a live virtual tour. But and so that was the attack on Troy. Whether there were 10,000 people, whether there was anything along those lines, that's really an unknown fact. Whether the Trojan horse, well, it is close enough, exactly. It's just an easier way to explain it because everyone says YouTube. Whether the Trojan horse were actually a horse, of course, it stayed in legend on the Greek side. And of course, there's more Greek sites in Turkey, and I'm in Asia right now. That's Europe over there. There's more Greek sites in Turkey than there is in all of Greece, for example. And of course, they kept expanding out because Greece itself was never particularly productive in terms of food. And they came and settled over here. The most famous site you've probably all heard of is Ephesus, right? Where probably Mary, who at that point was no longer a virgin, but that's where she lived her last years. And some of you would have been to that site. But Troy itself goes back 3000 BC, 5,000 years ago. That's right, Chloe, yeah. And then they kept being rebuilt. They know that 2 was invaded and burnt to the ground, and that was the treasure that Schliemann. So Schliemann made money being an arms dealer. He then made money in the gold rush, and then he came over here and found so many riches that there's a famous photo of his wife all adorned in the wealth, which then he sent to Germany and then was sacked by the Russians and ended up over there, anywhere but here where it probably belongs, part of that history. Troy 6, they don't dig anything beyond that because then it becomes Roman, and there's so many Roman sites, they know it. But the pre-Roman sites, what was burnt? Troy 2, Diana. So Troy 1, and there seems to be a 0 now too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up to 9, with 50 different levels, but 9 distinct city periods until a massive earthquake destroyed it in the year 500 under Roman, and they just moved on to other places. Now, how he found it, oddly enough, is it was described as a spot in Homer's Odyssey between two rivers with heavy winds. Well, here's the winds blowing in. There was dust all day long coming up from Africa, and the two rivers still there. And so Suleiman and his British friend went and dug it out and actually found it. And it's part of Troy. That's a known fact. The whole Trojan horse. So the idea of the horse is whether a fake horse or people hid in it is true. Maybe. They like the idea of it actually being a bridge, so they would climb up over the walls. And the walls were high. Interesting. I was thinking of my friends in Peru today because they built their walls at the angles. Same thing that Mike talks about in Cusco and everything for earthquake stability. And this is an earthquake zone. So there's one of the most important historical things. And Troy used to be a harbor, just like Ephesus, but that's all filled in now over time. Hey, Jeff. So that all filled in, silted up. Now this main pass through here, and the wind is grabbing me so much, of course, is the entrance into the continent. It's one of the subjects, and I'd like to reference back to Troy a couple more times. But on the other hand, remember that 5% of Turkey is European, and that's that section over there, right? It's only a couple of hours drive up to the Greek border, or you go north and you're up in Bulgaria. So, Helen, your city is I missed that joke, but I'm sure it's good, Helen. But over in that European section, that's about, Helen of Troy, excuse me. Of course it was. Helen of Troy was the one who actually, I'll send you a message. But on the far side is one of the, and there's a fort on this side too, but on the far side, these forts are 1463. So these are already Ottoman forts. Keep in mind, the Ottoman, the Seljuk Turks, which we talked about briefly, or I mentioned in one of the YouTube videos, the Seljuk Turks came in from Central Asia. So the people have been living here for 50,000 years, without question. But the oldest solid empire that we know about in the middle of Anatolia is more or less the Asian Turkey, was the Hittite Empire. That leads to the Kurdish language, Indo-European language. All of you who speak English or German, or your origins are Hittite linguistically, which goes back to Sanskrit. I might do a raw history on linguistics at some point. Karima and I could do it because she speaks Sanskrit. So that's an interesting bit of history. So it tracks back there. However, of course, Emperor Constantine moves his capital to Constantinople. They weren't too modest in those days. And that becomes Istanbul. By the late 1300s, the Ottoman Turks had come in and surrounded the whole area. And then 1453, of course, Istanbul falls. By 1463, they're controlling this passage. And keep in mind, a road doesn't show up till really the World War I period. So really everything happened by water. Now, when you see this kind of wind, it is interesting, Carla. Oh, hi there. Yeah, it's so interesting. I love language history. So this wind, these are the bays that you would come rushing in here to travel up to Istanbul, because the dominant winds come down from the north and the other way. I actually think that ferry is either stopped or stuck. They've got their red lights on. This is such a storm out here. Look at this fabulous sky. Fran, mommy's saying hi. Or Joe, mommy's saying hi. So you see the red lights out there, and there's another ferry on the far side over here. Now, we want to keep talking about the Dardanelles Straits and, of course, the Bosphorus Straits. But before I do that, I want to look across the way. Can you see that monument? You probably see it more clearly than I do. Looks like a soldier. There's a big military base over there. All right. Now, Mustafa Kemal. Do you know that name, everyone, by any chance? If you don't know the name Mustafa Kemal, then I will repronounce it, and almost everyone will know who I'm talking about. Yeah, Ataboy. No, Ataturk. Ataturk fought in the battles that happened on the far side, which I'm going to talk about. And he was the birth of modern Turkey. Now, I have lots of mixed feelings about Mustafa, about Ataturk himself. However, I have to thank him for switching from Arabic script to the Latin alphabet, because it's a phonetic language, and I can kind of just get by in Turkish. Now, I did years ago actually have conversational Turkish. It's a fabulous language. But that monument over there is just the first few words. Dum Ulçu is the start of a poem, and it's an epic Turkish poem. So again, we're jumping around in terms of dates, but it's worth it. Epic Turkish poem. Basically, it's a poem to the unknown soldier. Now, why would they have a poem to the unknown soldier right here? Well, this is where we climb back to World War One history. I expect some of you know where I'm going here, but in February 1915, a young admiral, a young government leader in the UK, you probably have never heard of him, his name was Winston Churchill, came up with this brilliant idea that he could cut off the Ottoman Empire from the rest of they weren't the Axis powers per se at that time, but Austria and, hi Anna Marie, nice to see you, but cut them off from Germany and Austria-Hungary, and of course create the supply route with Russia. And they were old ships that were not considered seaworthy to fight the German fleets on the open seas in the British Navy. So they brought the old ships, and they felt the Ottoman Empire, the sick man of Europe, you might remember that term, was not in any position to defend these straits. Thanks, Violetta. So this peninsula out here is Gallipoli Peninsula, or Gallipoli in Turkish. They sailed up, and this was the first real action in World War One. Now, the participants, the largest number of troops were British. There were large Welsh contingents. There were 57 soldiers from the Newfoundland Regiment. There were French. But of course, this is considered the coming of age and the nation building exercise of Australia and New Zealand. They were the Anzac troops. The Anzac troops were given, well, particularly the Australians were given the worst beach. They came in here. The Turks were not only much stronger in power than predicted, than suggested, they were also ready. And very quickly what happened on the Eastern Front, and this was the Southeastern Front, is precisely what had happened on the Western Front in Flanders, where they were immediately locked down into horrible trench warfare, particularly the Australian troops landed at a beach on lower ground. There were actually fewer, there were about 350,000 Allied troops coming over, and 275,000 Turkish troops. So the Turks had the higher ground, the Turks had the supply routes. The battle went on for about a year in a horrendous stalemate. The numbers are shocking, 56,000 dead on both sides, plus another 100 and something thousand wounded on both sides, up and down here. I actually feel like a huge sense of sadness for the British troops because they were sort of forgotten in amongst the other wars, whereas Australia and New Zealand, of course, built so much of their identity. The first thing to do after this tour is listen to the, not Waltzing Matilda, the classic one, but listen to the Waltzing Matilda, the war song. And I think some of that story that's been told, and when you walk down the street looking like a foreigner, people will ask you if you're an Anzac. And so, that's part of the reason to come here. Thanks, everyone. But this story that was told, that something like 4,000 New Zealanders died. It was a country of 2 million people back then, right? We have massive information we sent home. But it's the fact that a Kiwi and an Aussie could probably barely find Turkey on a map. It wasn't even Turkey, it was the Ottoman Empire. To think that you sailed away from the South Island of New Zealand to come sit over here. And the Turks, they will remind you they won. I mean, there's a pride in that. But they do very much believe in that sense that they defended their land, but what a pointless, utterly pointless war. And World War I, as we all know, can draw a line to World War II. And this was one of those ultimate, it was the arrogance of leadership and the arrogance of what feels a bit like racism, the belief that the Turks couldn't defend themselves. And of course they could. And remember, the Seljuk Turks, of course, conquered Central Asia and come all the way out here. So if one were to get into sort of fighting history. So anyway, it's a very meaningful place to stand here and feel part of this. Now, I am sheltered through here. Have a look at that sky, by the way, everyone. Paula, you just joined. I'm right here. That's true, Diana. Don't worry, I've got lots to say about Churchill. But when you see this incredible sky moving through a massive windstorm, apparently there's a huge storm in Istanbul today after our gorgeous day yesterday. So we are actually going to go and tour some of the battlefields tomorrow. I'm not, I mean, I've got a huge amount of war history. I don't particularly enjoy the war history, but I try and think about the lives of these kids who are 19, 18. It's very interesting now when I go to some of the cemeteries, and Finn will find people that are just 2 or 3 years older than him. So there is sunset now. Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. Yeah, listen to that song because it's so meaningful. And they say, each year they're marching, but we wonder what they're marching for. Now the ferries are moving again. So that one was stopped out in the water for quite a while. The other two are coming right across. Again, I'm in the city of Çanakkale. I like Turkish. I like the language. Now, there's a lot I want to show you, but I want to start walking because, well, I'm hoping, the lights are coming on out on the walkway. They have a beautiful boardwalk through here. Just remind for those who have a fake screen, for those who have just joined, there are tugs and it's also Coast Guard out there, by the way. And I have seen the big freighters coming up and down. Again, this is one of the world's great trade routes. And you come down through the Bosphorus, where do you head through? The Suez Canal, right? And it's all interconnected. I might just have to have some seafood tonight. I'll see what the kids feeling like. But yeah, we left very early. We were picked up at 6:30 this morning. It was about a 5-hour drive down the coast. And then we made our way across on the ferry and went down and toured Troy. And Finn enjoyed it, but it was really raining. There's the name of the city. So Çanakkale, right there. So that C is a Ch. Right? So Çana is pottery. It's an ancient pottery that was built in this area. There's no industry here, but of 150,000 people, a university of 40,000, and of course a big military presence because it's the entrance to the Dardanelles. And then the same word we see everywhere, Belediyesi, which just means greater city or municipality. Of course, you see it all over Istanbul in that macro sense. So it's sort of fun. But I'll take you down a couple of the streets. It's funny, I always make such an effort not to kind of film people directly on these tours. But yesterday with Sally in Istanbul, he was walking straight up to people and he said, oh, they love it. And that's why if you tell them it's YouTube, then they really feel like they're, I never, ever like to tell lies. Look at all the fishing equipment. I've seen so many people fishing out here. And I sort of felt it would be fun to spend a day fishing. You know that old saying, right? You give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach a man to fish, he drinks all day. I think that's how it goes. But it is a great tradition. Now, the same sort of streets as you see even in Istanbul, very clean. Of course, it's windy, and with the lack of industry, it's not a polluted place. I do want to walk along the waterfront, but I actually just want to take you back a little bit because there's a few sites down through here. Interestingly enough, there's a couple of bars. But why is this bar so important? Well, Schelling, hey Janet. Schelling was the German who, of course, came and rediscovered the archaeological site of Troy, used to stay here. I'm sure you can work that out with the Hotel des Étrangers. Oh, there's the wind grabbing, huh? Hotel des Étrangers. That's the foreigners' hotel. And that's because, of course, this was actually a tiny town, but this is always where you had the taxes and the controls coming into the Dardanelles Straits. Hi, Janice. I hope you're getting a big storm there, too, because we could share. But this was the hotel where all of the foreigners would stay. Generally, they would be involved in shipping for whatever their country is. Very important to remember that there was a substantial Greek population right up till 1923, 1925. And let's talk about that for a second. See, that's written in Greek there. So, l'Hôtel des Étrangers. Right? So, a lot of French trade, every trade that went on with Ukraine or Russia. And of course, you come up through the Black Sea, you get up to Crimea, you get into all the main ports up there. But of course, because this was fundamentally Greek for much of its time, under the Ottoman Empire, it's so interesting to talk about some of that history because it was obvious that Byzantium was going to fall. And it chose to fall, it is said, to the Turks and not to Western powers. And Christians, because of course it had been sacked. Remember the Fourth Crusade sacked Istanbul or Constantinople. It didn't even make it to Jerusalem. They were violent times. And Islam, of course, was much more respectful towards Judaism as well. So these are just important bits of history. But it did fall, and it was taken over of course, and all became part of the Ottoman Empire at that time. But they respected and allowed all the other minorities. They paid taxes, of course, there's all those stories, but they paid taxes and lived here. The Greeks did not fundamentally leave this country until after the declaration of the Turkish Republic under Ataturk, Mustafa Kemal, who then rebuilt this country as a secular modern country. And it is a secular modern country. It's an interesting country. And of course, we can all talk about Erdogan because he's moved to a presidential system, which is a big change from the parliamentary system that they had. And that's, I think, a bit of a concern all around. But suddenly the Greek kings told the Greeks to come home, and it had a huge swap. A bit of history I think people aren't as aware of. I mean, we certainly know about it in India and Pakistan and the life that cost. Here, something like 1.2 million Greeks left what is now Turkey, and something like 800,000 Turks left Greece. Now, I'm going to try and come here. I want to show you this clock tower, but the wind is grabbing me so much. I'm going to try an atom shot. So hang on tight, everyone. Tight as you can. Boom. Now, this is 1895, 1896. Clock towers, of course, clock towers significant, always significant in a port environment. Now, hang on again. But you weren't to build towers under the Ottoman Empire. So this was actually commissioned and approved by the last Sultan, who, of course, led the Ottoman Empire into war on the side of the Germans and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. You weren't to build a tower because it was considered showing off. The sultans had towers in their properties. Sorry, the wind is just grabbing me now. And if you want to take a screenshot, you can, and then you can spend the rest of your day translating it. But Saak Welesi Sultan Iki, talking about it being built, 1895 to 96. But they had a clock here in 1876. Now remember that this language, Turkish language, is not an Indo-European language, whereas Kurdish is, right? Big difference. I'll do the same thing, Ruth, in Israel with the Hebrew. And happy Hanukkah again, by the way. Just as a total side note, I'll come back to the history. So part of the reason Finn and I took a kind of pseudo-organized tour today is because it's always fun on tours. You meet people from elsewhere, and there was only a couple on the tour, and so they picked us up first thing and then picked them up. And it was the most interesting cultural day for us because they were originally from Sudan, from Khartoum. And I don't think I've certainly not sat for 4 hours chatting with someone from Khartoum. It was just a treat. They were lovely. Hey, TNJ, so they were up. So he explained the family history, and they were actually from what he called a tribal group up near the Egyptian border that had moved down to Khartoum. So they weren't ethnically Sudanese so much as more broader Egyptian. But he actually works in Dubai right now, but she is just doing her final residency as a doctor outside of London. But they're thinking they've fallen so in love with Istanbul, they might move. She was quite religious, like had her head covered, but, clearly a very bright woman, engaging and fun, that kind of cultural thing. And that's one of the reasons I love Istanbul. So everybody's lovely. So I'm just, obviously one of the ferries just came in. Now, where I am, I'm on the Asian side. I like this ancient. This is a lovely bit of pottery. I can't tell you a great deal about it, but I can tell you about it. Absolutely, I can. And that's because Çanak, as in Çanakkale, comes from pottery. And then, of course, you have the fish, because fishing is one of the main industries here. But people think, and you see this eye everywhere in Turkey, people think it's an evil eye. It isn't. It wards off the evil eye. Now, Islam doesn't particularly like it because it seems like idol worship a little bit, but it's such a symbol in Turkey that one sees it everywhere. But if we look south, so about 20 kilometers south is where you get down to the archaeological site of Troy, the original city, which again, all is silted up. And the guide today was talking about all the fish in the water, and we saw sheep, and we're like, wow, that's really fast evolution. But it's silted up. But of course, then they moved down, and that's also true with Ephesus. Ephesus is about 4 hours south of here, to put it in some perspective, and then 5 hours south you get down to Izmir. which is the second city of this fabulous country. Now, I'm going to try and walk along the waterfront. Hola, Maria, un abrazo. I'm going to walk along the waterfront. I do like coming down these streets. Like it's fun to discover things together. And there's the Akar Chekel Wine House over there on the right. Hey, Kristen. Yeah, Ephesus is fascinating. So Troy is much smaller, but it has all of those same features. But Troy played such a huge role. Do you know that symbol, by the way, everyone? Does that mean something to you? No. I mean, it's obviously, I think of it as the Métis flag of Canada. But yeah, Meta but it's, yeah, infinity. Now, few reasons why it could be. I don't know the reason it's embedded in there, but there's a few reasons it could be. Of course, Islamic culture does not paint idols. They take that, you know, don't worship false idols much more seriously than Catholics do. An interesting little bit of history, but they don't look at anything archaeologically at Troy. That's true. They don't. Oh, mentally, that's a good one. They don't talk about anything but after 6 Troy, because Troy 6 is probably where the Trojan horse and the whole battle was. Now the battle is proven, but as for the 10,000 soldiers and all of that, there's no evidence of any of that. It doesn't mean it didn't happen, but again, it was already 500-year-old hearsay when Homer talked about it. His lovely old ferries. Of course, I spent a lot of time taking ferries as well. However, and if you can Google it as well, I don't know the name, but up around the corner where it's nearly finished, I was mentioning at the beginning of the tour, is that giant span bridge. It'll be the largest span in the world. And they've had to build it to resist these winds, which can come and shift down from the north as well. So it's a pretty fantastic thing to talk about. But I just want to curve around. So World War I, just because there is this site here. Now there's monuments all over the other side about the whole World War I period. But of course, now this area has been fought over for so many generations. The reason why they look back from Troy 6, so Troy 6 probably fell in about 1250 BC, so still over 3,000 years ago, to put that in some perspective. Oh, it's fenced off, unfortunately. I wish I could sneak in here. This is all talking about the actual battles of Gallipoli, and this is very important. But to go back, so pre that, they're going back to about 3,000 BC, 5,000 years ago. It may have been a population of 500, 600 way back when. And the reason they know that is there's these concentric rings that they keep finding. Well, they found them all really going out and out and out. And then, of course, now with ground technology, you can see where all the paths were and everything. But just how you took this. These were the ships coming in 1915 in February. So this was principally the British flotilla sent by Winston Churchill to come and control exactly the straits where I'm in right now. Now, they felt they would either slip in or break through the barricades in no time. Well, they didn't. They were already half scuttled. What that had, and if you can scan out on the map, you will look on the far side of the Gallipoli Peninsula, out really up. You're coming in on the Greek side, like Thessaloniki, up through that area. That's where they ended up landing on lower ground, or there was higher ground above them, which, someone got it. Well, some of it, I think some of it was also remade. But the Turks had the higher ground, and that's why it was just such a slaughter. But it is very significant, and there has been a friendship developed over time between Australia and New Zealand and Turkey, because they literally said, our sons were sent to kill each other without knowing who each other was. And I think that's a really relevant thing to talk about. I would expect, well, as is the case with so much of World War I, so much of it's forgotten now, and so much of it should be forgotten because it was awful. As we say, thanks, Annie, the birthplace, or the birth of the Australian New Zealand identity as a nation, 1917, Vimy Ridge, we talk about that as Canadians, and that's right up by where Garima lives, right? 7,500 Canadians wounded or killed in one day. But this was just the worst of just that horrendous war. But the fact that they've created this friendship over time by saying, what are we doing killing each other? For absolutely no reason. And then this was also the final and utter collapse of the Ottoman Empire. And of course, the Ottomans, and there's a lot to respect with them, but I don't know if you're familiar that much with these stories, but the Ottoman sultans were very worried about their siblings, of course, taking over. So they'd have them killed at birth quite often, or the next in line for the throne would be locked up until it was their turn. Well, can you imagine when you're locked up in prison alone for 15 years? You're let out, you have no social skills, you're suddenly sultan, and incidentally, you're handed a harem of women. Like, it's, I mean, on top of all that. So, a little bit calm right here. And again, sons of Gallipoli, and over here. So, it's so yeah, absolutely the whole of oh, it's true power. Well, it's power mongering, and it was the failure of a central system, and that's one of the concerns. And I don't want to walk around Turkey talking to them about their politics at the moment. But the fact that Erdogan has moved to a presidential system from a parliamentary system is always, I think, something one could be a little concerned about. If you have, well, the wind is doing a job on the side of this, but um, yeah, I mean, it's amazing when you go down through history and you just talk about war after war after war, and I don't know well, you've all listened to the Willie McBride song, "The Green Fields of France," the Irish one. It all happens again. That's also a World War One. Remember, that was the war to end all wars, and therefore we weren't going to have more wars, and that led to an even bigger war. So it's quite meaningful. Now the wind will shift again tomorrow. It will shift now. Obviously, these big, powerful ships have changed the day, but in the days of sailing, which is most of our history, the winds governed everything. And so if you controlled the gates here, you would tax people as they came in and out, tax boats as they came in and out. And if they didn't have the winds to move themselves up, then they were stuck there in one place. Hey, if you haven't seen my silly little video from last night of Finn getting ice cream, it's a fun one. I don't think I'll leave it on YouTube that long, but it was just sort of a fun tradition. And yeah, it was fun. And he wanted to do it. But then he said, "Oh, post it in the Vanny's group. Don't put it on YouTube." But I put it on YouTube because it was easier. So I might take it down. Now, these little boats down through here are fishing boats. I was chatting with a gentleman today, and it's not very deep along the shore, although the Central Straits, of course, are deep enough. I don't think anyone but anyone will be out fishing at the moment. But the if you can Google the new bridge that's being built up the roadway. It was incredible. I tried to get a photo coming down, but there was so much dust in the air, and the dust was coming out because of all the sandstorms blowing up. I mean, this is a wicked storm. We were in a kind of a mid-sized Sprinter van, and excellent driver, but being blown about coming down here. Now, my desire to continue traveling through this magnificent country just burns when I come to a place like this, because I know I could keep going south now to Ephesus and Izmir and Pamukkale, which is terraces. The other interesting thing is there's so much different rock around here because it's volcanic. Of course, you can think of the Greek islands and Crete, all volcanic activity. And so they have basalt, but they also have limestone and they also have sandstone. They sort of have everything all together. Actually, a pet name. Oh, is that right, Gareth? Isn't that interesting? Isn't it fun how we have these? And the G is generally silent. It's a space. Of course, they were converting a language. And I'm sorry, I'll come back to language for a minute, because I say this is not an Indo-European language. It is an Asian language. It could be vaguely, with the lovely cats everywhere, and they're beautiful, could be vaguely related to, it could be vaguely related to small blonde children who just randomly walk down the street. So I do have the earbuds in, so I don't know how well they can hear you, Finn. What did you think of Troy today?
Troy was very cool to see, very interesting. Learned about it quite a lot in my art history class at school here. So cool to see it in person. Sculptures that I saw in my class served useful today as general knowledge. So it was very cool to hear the mythology. Normally I'm not a big nerd for mythology, but today that was super interesting to hear. So overall, Troy, 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10 for Troy. Here we are. Do you want to keep walking? Yeah. All
I'll
right.
walk a little bit and then I
Okay.
go back.
Okay. We'll wander down. So, so that's what he looks like, everyone, with a haircut too. But we do have a couple of more highlights. So, Kristen, I would call those ruins. However, and yeah, they are ruins. But I have an article on my website called "Don't Call It a Ruin" or don't I can't remember. Don't say ruin. That's right. Because I learned when I lived in Peru that we would call them archaeological sites because their culture is still alive and well. And so it's their archaeology. Yeah, the Roman culture is a bit different. The Roman Empire came. You do, Mark. uh, but the Roman Empire came crashing to an end in 1453. Look, some old. I remember doing a tour in Ireland one time with a group from the southern U.S. and there was this young lady who was just so enthusiastic, and there was the remnants of a castle. She goes, "Hey, y'all, look, old stuff." I thought that was cool. Now, changing subject for a minute. Who has seen the movie? Did you actually watch the movie? What was it called? Troy. Troy. Did you watch the Brad Pitt movie? Everyone? He got shot in the ankle. Yeah. Shell has great. So I have not seen it. Have you seen it?
I've not seen
No, I haven't seen it. But yeah. So we all have our Achilles heel. Mine is the lack of having ever watched movies. But here comes one. Well, if you haven't, it's one thing. But if you have,
There's the horse used in the actual movie.
that is the real horse from the movie. Çanakkale purchased it. So it was made in. No, the actual horse though. We did look it up, but it was made. Goodness me, somewhere it's made. It's not actually wood. Um, yeah, it's made out of plastic, and then it was moved. Of course, not made in the U.S., but taken to the U.S. China, I think, made the U.S. to do this. Hey, thanks, Karima.
No.
Oh yeah, or made in Malta. That's what it made in Malta. Exactly. There you go. And so then it was taken to the States. But they're thinking. So the one at the archaeological site is actually taken off a piece of pottery that was found in Mykonos, which shows the people inside. This may have been more true to the story because they would have used it as a ladder to go up and over the walls rather than coming out from the inside. That would have been the logic of it. And when you see the entrance to Troy 6, it was far too narrow for something like that to be rolled up through the middle. But yeah, try and get a nice postcard of this. It's pretty neat to see. So hopefully you see why I wanted to do a tour here. We've got Gallipoli, we've got the Dardanelles, we have Troy. Really, truly, we're squeezing in. I can do it, Adam Shaw. I don't know if it'll be good, Diana, but we'll give it a shot. Hang on tight, everyone. Yeah. There we go. Give it a shot. So, but this is the one from the movie. Now, hang on tight, one. Bienvenue. Reprends vos affaires ici. Finn, well, we're both cat people, so we keep seeing so many cats. And people are so kind. It's just street animals. Yeah, there's lots to talk about, I'm sure, in a broader sense about Islam and all sorts of things. But the kindness both to people in need and the kindness to street animals. Today we met a tiny kitten at the archaeological site. But the lady who worked there had found it away from his mom, and so she's raising it and taking care. It was gorgeous. And so we had fun holding the kitten. It was sweet. I think this plaque, there's one on the other side. I think this one's in English. There it is. So, here you go. So maybe, yeah, it's so true, Annie, isn't it? See if you can take this. The ancient city of Troy, where the Trojan War took place. And again, they seem to think the Trojan War is true. The horses, well, it was hearsay 500 years ago. So, isn't that lovely? So take a postcard here. See if I can line it up. There it is. I think the gimbal's just having a bit of a fight with the wind. That's right. Now, you know the old saying, you got to take, what is it, the horse by the tail? Sometimes you have to take the bull by the tail and face the situation. I wouldn't climb up into there. But sure, Maria, let me come around the other side because I wanted to show you this building in the distance. And I'll see. So I don't know if I can get all the way far enough out. Yeah, they do. I'll see if I can get a. Oh, just there. Love seeing the palm trees. Now let's see if we can get this whole horse in here. There, oh, just about. Oh, excuse-moi, monsieur. Have a peek at that. So there you go. You're welcome, Maria. Now, the lights really are coming out. It's nicely lighted out here. Um, yeah, so many old walls. Well, of course, the walls are interesting because they built them here the way they built them in Peru at an angle because of earthquakes, right? And then they used the fishbone dry system. It is dramatic, isn't it? Now, I just want to show you, sorry, it is super windy, but this is Çanakkale Valiji. No, Valiji, because the G is silent. So these are the government offices. Now, these government offices are not elected. So again, with this new presidential system, they have government, Ankara, and then mayors, nothing in between, a little bit like the system in France. But so all of this government, though, and one of the examples they say these are the people who make the decisions on lockdowns, for example, but that came out of Ankara, and then the local administrators decide if it's a right or wrong thing to do. Interesting, but they've certainly centralized power. Greater Turkey is massive, and it is about 83 million people, about 1.5 times the size of Germany. So in a European context, it's a big, big country. And there is Mustafa again, Ataturk. So, and the Çanakkale 1915 is basically the Geçilimez is to stop. You're stopped here. You don't get further to attack. So that's a real statement by Mustafa himself. So it is quite a political statement. I will say when I first traveled in around Turkey in the past, though, before you had GPS, the central square of every single community in this country has got a statue of Ataturk, the nation building exercise, conversion from an empire. And I must admit, we would say always, well, you just got to find Attaboy and you know where you're going. Yeah, the sky is fantastic. So here's and they call it, well, it's Troya there, but it's also Troja. Ain't smart. So that's maybe, and these were not Roman centurions, of course, they were Greek centurions, but the Romans built a history amongst themselves that Troy is where they originated from. Very interesting. And in doing so, they started to create Troy as sort of a place of pilgrimage. And there, until the 5th century, massive earthquake, and that was the end of Troy. But to think that it had existed for 3,500 years at that point. Yeah. Who was Helen of Troy? Helen of Troy, I think, comes quite a lot later in the story, Diana, or it's built into the story. But that's, again, where you're just really talking about all sorts of different stories. But Helen of Troy really going back, isn't it lovely, Annie? Really goes back much later. This pyramid, I'm sorry, I really can't tell you what it's about. It's just a gorgeous thing. But what I can show you on the other side, the sense of the old walls, and probably and fairly concretely what Troy would have been like. So, Troja 1, so 19 meters in diameter, 6 to 8 houses. Again, now that lasted 500 years, right? You put that in some perspective. Basically, they were farmers, and they didn't have a lot to build with. Now, the concentric rings, as the archaeological sites have gone on, the digs, they found one ring, another ring, and so forth as it grows. Of course, this is feudalism 101 before anyone came up with the idea of feudalism. You had the kings, the elites, in one form or another. They didn't seem to have a royal palace in Troy 1, but they're not sure. They just kept building on top of itself as it went up. And then Troy 2 was definitely destroyed in war and fire, and that's where Shelia, the German, actually found his huge stash of treasures. So that was interesting. So we'll go up 3, carry on. So all these same sort of periods for Troy 5. Now, the whole, and merci Alain, when we talk about it coming out into the period, or the sort of feudal-like system that would have existed here, is simply because you would run and hide inside the walls. Why they believe they know there was war in Troy 6 there were tiny little dwellings that have been uncovered just on the inside of the walls. That means you were someone out here farming olive oil, which goes back forever, of course, wine, which they drank sort of ambitiously, all of that. But they went inside the walls and in tiny spaces would build dwellings. That means they were under attack and they had to come in. So here is Troy 6, everyone, at this point. So, yeah, there it is. Now, you might be able to read. I'll read it just quickly. Researchers usually show this period as the one in which the epic war of Troy took place, as is told in Homer's Iliad. The city is now at least 10 times bigger than Troy 1. The citadel walls are constructed from stones placed diagonally without using mortar. So that's that history. Then by the time you're you're still into Greek period by 7, but now you're moving into late Greek, early Roman, and then boom, into Roman period. And the Roman period is actually easy to understand. Of course, the Roman Empire existed until 1453, but we know it's Roman immediately because you see marble, for example, right? So many of the stories around, but they do make sense. And the fact that Shelley found it by following the Iliad, the two rivers and the wind, is a pretty telling thing, I think. At least it gives some sense. And they know it's Troy because of the names that came out as well. So there you go. This is where I drove down. So it's not a great map this late in the evening. But there's the peninsula of Gallipoli, World War I, Çanakkale, where I am now, and then down. That was 25 minutes drive. It is cool, Ruth. It really is. And then also, the other thing, so one of the many, many things, as I'm sure you're all aware, little Finn's brain is just going all the time. And one of the things he's been Googling, like a big stellar doll here, but he's gone to a real tradition now of Googling safety in places, like their safety ratings and their crime ratings. And Istanbul a city of 20 million, has a lower crime rate than many other smaller big cities in Western countries. And this place, as soon as he came here, and I have stayed here before, it was years ago, he Googled it, and it's actually almost as safe as a Japanese town. Isn't that fun? And so you have these lovely walkways, friendly, warm people, interesting food. And I know it's just starting to rain on me a little bit, but that's good because we are coming towards the end of our time. There is, of course, a very concrete nationalism in this country. You'll see the big Turkish flag up top. I mean, that is everywhere. That was part of the nation-building society. Sally and I saw immediately eye to eye on a lot of things. Didn't you agree, Mike? Yes, true. But he said he has neighbors who put Turkish flags outside of their houses, and he actually says to them, "Did you not know where you are?" So, how one might feel about that. I feel that way though in Canada too. Like I see flags for no reason flying around, but that's another point. Now, my kids just wandered off again, without making friends probably. Well, you're very welcome, Coy. I'm glad you could make it because I think you're working, aren't you? Kathy, you're coming in so late. But actually, I'm going to head down. So you see there's some lovely cafes and restaurants down here. Thanks, Janet. So again, for those of you who come in late, I realize this was a little bit of a test to put up a tour so last minute. I knew I wanted to do something down here because this is an area of Turkey that's fascinating. And, even the Turkish guides, I don't think come down here very often, but we wanted to. And so I wanted to share all of this. But this is where, our camper van page helps a lot. I also want to thank Ruth, as always. I know you started tagging people. So I'll be interested, I'll look at the end of how many people. Let's see how many people are actually here. But it looks like we get a big crowd, and I'd love to be able to do this. I totally understand if people are busy and can't. But when I come to a place like this, I didn't have control over the schedule today. And then when we landed over here, and we had the tour booked to Troy, because I thought about doing one there. And the guide said, "Oh, no, you'll be back and settled by 5 o'clock. I said, "Well, let's do it." So I will put up another one. I already have the link. Thursday, the forecast is fantastic. So I will put up a tour in Cappadocia. Sally told me yesterday that in the town of Gorome. I have good reception. I won't have a problem. So I can promise you a tour in Cappadocia, everyone. Oh, Rusto. Yeah, so, and I put into the afternoon. I might even put on one more just at a different time zone for people's sake. But the real reason I'm keeping it private, sorry, the wind is crazy. Oh, it is second. The real reason I'm keeping them private is, I mean, I love how open our platform is, but if I went and put one up publicly in Istanbul, then they would actually list my channel as like an Istanbul local guide, and I don't want to do that to someone like Sally and good guides like that, you know. So I'm happy to share the links around, and then cap it. And also, I think, I mean, I'm totally open to the feedback, but I think we all sort of enjoy these private tours this way too, because we all sort of, yeah, Thursday night. I haven't put it out, but it is timed for, I think, 4 p.m. here, so you'll have to get up early. Oh, did you see that? That was lightning. That's so cool. Oh, that really was. There we are. And I might try and put one more up in Cappadocia kind of early my time in Turkey, because I've had a few messages, particularly from the Aussies, and I would have loved to have connected with Australia here, having talked about Gallipoli. Donnie, you're absolutely right, but I'm thank you for checking. I'm actually flying a huge kite with a key on it. No, I'm not. It's I'm so low here. There goes another phrase. There's the war memorial way across the way there. Well, the poem, the epic Turkish poem, which I can read to you, and I can pronounce Turkish quite well. I just couldn't really understand what it says. But it's really to the unknown shoulder. I promise I'll be careful. But a good storm tonight. I guess I can't control another one. But yeah, and the little kids run away on me too. So there we go. But we're going to go have something yummy for dinner. So I'll be interested to see how big a crowd. But I'd love to be able to do this throw up a tour quickly. And interesting points. So yeah, I hope, I'm really sorry that I wasn't able to get this out to the Aussies and the Kiwis, because this is actually something that really means a lot to them here. And then everyone's interested in Troy. I just want to come out and show you these trees. They've all been, oh, sorry, it's super windy. It's all been lighted up at night here. Okay. But it's actually a fairly warm temperature. It's just the wind is so harsh that it's kind of drawing the mouth out. Oh, and by the way, you'll see the hotel up there up top. It says Anzac Hotel. So they really do. I mean, this has become a place of pilgrimage in its own right. Well, thank you, Ruth. I really do. I really think there's so much here. This is why I wanted to make the effort. It was fun doing that trip with Sally yesterday, and I think he's an excellent guy too. And also, incidentally, we went out with him for dinner, and thanks, Karima. Yeah, well, post them around. It's not bad, but it's he had a hookah, the thing where they sort of smoke, and Finn actually tried it. I mean, he didn't inhale it, of course, but and I don't think he was too taken by it. I just, it was sort of a fun thing to have done. So here we are, the Anzac Hotel. Oh, what's the last thing I want to say? No, I'm not a fan either. Hey, bonsoir, merci Alain. What is that in North America? What's that theater chain? Orion? No, yeah. Oh, what's the word I'm looking for? It's the origin of the word audience, anyway, in Greek. I didn't know that. I thought that was an interesting thing I learned today. Odeon, thanks, Tara. Yeah, Odeon, yeah. So that's what they were calling the small amphitheater that they had in Troy because it was covered. So it was an Odeon. It's an Odeon theater. But it's that we extrapolate audience from that. So anyway, on that happy note, so ladies and gentlemen, peace and love as always. Oh yeah, sure, Annie. Maybe someone can put that up really quickly. I know you're not on Facebook. I think, Annie, you're going to have to make up a little fake account just to follow along on the camper van group. Mark, big hugs to you, my friend. Bye, everyone. So we're doing the battlefields tomorrow and then spending the night at Istanbul Airport and flying to Cappadocia the following day. So thank you for coming along. Thank you for the last minute coming along, everyone. It's such a treat to share. And And I will just leave you with a moment from the Dardanelles Straits here. And if you ever want me to organize a real live tour here, I'll do it I won't do it now because the whole world's locking up again. But when it isn't locked up, thanks, Jackie. So thanks, everyone. Listen, peace and love. Hi from Asia. Big hugs, friend. Hi from Asia, everyone. That's the boat to Europe.